And welcome back to Terminology Tuesday. I hope you guys enjoyed your winter break, and it's time to get back to talking about pines. And today we have one of my most favorite species. This is Pinus glabra, spruce pine. This is one of our most unique pine species. It's the most tolerant of moisture and shade of any of our pine species, and it occurs in areas where the soil is very moist and very rich. So you find it in mixed hardwood forests like this beech magnolia slope forest we're in today, as well as in floodplains, along stream banks, in hardwood hammocks. But it's also occasionally found in drier soils in uplands that have calcareous soils with, limestone outcropping. This species only occurs in North Florida. It doesn't get into Central or South Florida, and it has a fairly limited range along the Gulf coastal plain. The needles are very short, only 2 to 4 inches long, and they occur in bundles called fascicles of 2, with only 2 needles per fascicle. They also have this kind of twist to them. They're often, typically twisted like this. Shortleaf pine also has short needles, but one way to differentiate that species is the twigs, the young twigs on Pinus glabra, spruce pine, are relatively smooth compared to the scaly twigs on Pinus echinata, shortleaf pine. The female cones are very small. They're only about 2 to 3.5 inches long. They are conical to elliptical in shape. And one of the distinguishing features is that they have almost no stalk. The stalks are incredibly close to the twig here, so they look really tight on the twigs. And they stay on the plant for 2 to 4 years. So by the time they fall on the ground, they're usually this kind of grayish color. They also have very small, almost unnoticeable spines, so they're not painful to the touch. So we only have 3 species of pine with short needles. Pinus echinata, which I showed you the twigs are one way to differentiate it, as well as the bark, which we'll talk about later. But there's also Pinus clausa, sand pine, which has pretty much identical needles and female cones. But the best way to differentiate sand pine, Pinus clausa, from spruce pine, Pinus glabra, is the habitat that they occur in. Sand pine only occurs in upland sandy soils, and spruce pine only occurs in more moist or calcareous soils. The most distinguishing characteristic of Pinus glabra is its bark. On older trees, it is narrowly ridged and furrowed, producing small, thin, and flat bark plates. This is very reminiscent of spruce in the genus Pinaceae, and that's where the common name spruce pine comes from. This bark is also very reminiscent of hardwood trees, and so sometimes I think of this Pinus glabra as the pine that's pretending to be a hardwood, because when you glance through the forest, it often looks like an oak or something else. It also, to me, the bark is very reminiscent of an alligator skin, and so that's one way that I recognize it is, oh, that's a pine tree with bark that looks similar to an alligator skin, and so it's a spruce pine, Pinus glabra. It also tends to be very dark in color, like a dark gray, brown, almost black sometimes, and so one of the common names is black pine. Another identifying feature of the bark on this pine is that because of the habitats it occurs in, shady, moist habitats, it often grows lichen on it. And so you can see the really old, mature ones will have almost white patches up at the top because they're covered in lichen. Because spruce pine occurs in rich, moist, calcareous soils like this slope forest, it also often co-occurs with another favorite species of mine, Trillium. This is Trillium underwoodii, Underwood's Trillium, and this is an early blooming individual. The young saplings of Pinus glabra are reminiscent of Charlie Brown's Christmas tree. They're very spindly, which makes sense because they occur in very shaded areas. Their branches are kind of twisty, and of course the needles are very twisty as well. So it kind of gives them this weak demeanor. They also have very smooth bark, which is usually this kind of darkish gray color. My favorite aspect of this species, which is very hard to capture on a phone camera, is its mature form. The large, mature individuals of the species often have a really beautiful shape that is reminiscent to me of many Japanese pines. I hope you enjoyed this introduction to spruce pine, Pinus glabra. And if you live in North Florida, I recommend going out and seeing if you can identify one of these in your region. And I also definitely highly recommend planting it if you have more rich, moist, or calcareous soils.